Welcome to the University of Vermont at the American Heart Association's EPI Lifestyle Conference in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm Vin Lay, a medical student at the UVM Larner College of Medicine. This national conference has a record 14 presentations by researchers from UVM. Today, I'm going to share some breaking science being presented this week about high blood pressure or hypertension, a leading cause of death in the world.
I'm Elizabeth Pendlebury, a second-year medical student and student researcher supported by the UVM Cardiovascular Research Institute.
I'm Jake Aisi, a second-year medical student at the UVM Larner College of Medicine.
I am Dr. Minaz Mawani, a postdoctoral associate at UVM Larner College of Medicine.
There are 3 presentations this week about atrial fibrillation, or AFib, an abnormal rhythm of the heart that is a leading risk factor for stroke. 2 of these studies addressed the connections of heart and brain health. The 3rd study looked at how AFib relates to heart attacks. AFib affects millions of older adults in the United States. UVM medical student researcher Vin Lay had 2 presentations on AFib. First, he showed that in those with a prior stroke, AFib was associated with increased risk of developing future cognitive impairment. This was not the case in the absence of prior stroke. Future research should aim to determine if interventions to preserve cognitive function in those with AFib and stroke will be effective. Second, in other research, given that AFib can increase the risk of dementia, Vin wanted to understand why this is the case. He reported a study of over 2,000 people with AFib where he found that increased levels of 3 blood biomarkers were each associated with risk of developing cognitive impairment in people with AFib. One of the biomarkers, called GDF-15, is a marker of inflammation, and investigators found that anticoagulation treatment might protect against cognitive problems in people with higher GDF-15. Results suggest that GDF-15 might be useful in clinical practice to guide prevention efforts for dementia.
Black Americans have the highest rate of hypertension of any racial or ethnic group in the world. In addition to heart disease and stroke, hypertension is a risk factor for cognitive impairment. UVM medical student investigator Elizabeth Pendlebury theorized that higher blood pressure is a stronger risk factor for incident cognitive impairment in Black compared to white adults. First, she found that higher blood pressure was associated with increased risk for developing cognitive impairment. Then she found that the risk was equal for Black and white adults. These findings differ from other research showing a stronger association of blood pressure with stroke in Black compared to white people.
Dr. Minaz Mawani, a postdoctoral scientist at UVM, is presenting 2 studies about cardiac arrest in children. First, Dr. Mawani evaluated 20 years of published data on cardiac arrest in children that occurs outside of hospitals. We know that out-of-hospital cardiac arrest in children have poor outcomes. This study found that only 1 in 8 of these children survived, and 16 of 17 had bad neurological outcomes. Survival was better in Europe than North America, Asia, and Australia. Importantly, looking to the future, the quality of the literature could be improved with use of uniform reporting criteria.
Hypertension is a leading cause of cardiovascular disease and kidney disease. It has a significant burden globally. In a large UVM study, medical student Ray Puthama investigated if the biomarker proencaphalin A, or PENK-A for short, predicted an increased risk of hypertension. Findings showed that PENK-A did not substantially increase risk for hypertension. The investigators suggest that future research should aim to understand associations of PENK-A with cardiovascular disease risk, especially in those with kidney disease, since they have higher levels.
Turning to hospitalized children, decision-making about resuscitating a hospitalized child is complicated. A survey of physicians and parents across the United States, led Dr. Minaz Mawani, found that physicians tend to overestimate how likely it is that a critically ill child will survive. Authors also found that parents would want their child resuscitated even in situations where the chance of survival is so low that the physician would not recommend trying to resuscitate.
Given the persistent disparities in hypertension affecting Black Americans and especially Black women in the U.S., investigators led by UVM medical student researcher Evelyn Thomas studied whether living in segregated neighborhoods affects the risk of developing hypertension differently for Black and white women and men. Counter to their hypotheses, they found that Black women living in more segregated areas had a lower risk of developing high blood pressure. Future research will be done to better understand this unexpected relationship. As I mentioned, Black people in the US face the highest rates of hypertension. They also have higher inflammatory responses, which could play a role. In a large study led by UVM medical student researcher Erin Manogaran, researchers studied the impact of residential segregation on blood markers of inflammation. They showed that a measure of residential segregation was associated with lower levels of IL-1B, a key thromboinflammatory biomarker related to hypertension. These findings suggest, like the other study I described, that living in majority Black counties may offer protective effects against certain inflammatory processes linked to hypertension.
While its risk factors are well described, this cause of hypertension remains elusive. Dr. Tim Plan from UVM had two presentations here this week trying to tease apart these causes. In the first study, he identified three naturally occurring patterns of blood biomarkers representing abnormal biology of different organ systems related to hypertension. Specifically, these three patterns all relate to inflammation, and they involve blood clotting, kidney disease, and high cholesterol. Once these patterns were identified, in the second presentation, Dr. Plan studied these patterns in 1,200 Black and white adults free from hypertension. Persons with strong signals for the blood clotting inflammation pattern and the cholesterol inflammation pattern had the greatest risk of developing hypertension. Authors concluded that the origins of hypertension might relate to adverse inflammation that coexists with adverse blood clotting and high cholesterol.
In another UVM study of people with AFib, Dr. Andres Cordova Sanchez, a UVM Medical Center cardiology fellow, looked at the risk of heart attack and AFib. They found that in over 2,000 people with AFib, multiple laboratory biomarkers predicted the risk of heart attack. Next steps will involve seeing if any of these might be useful in clinical practice to reduce heart attack risk in AFib.
In research led by UVM medical student Aaron Stutzenberg, a higher blood level of pro-clotting factor, factor 9, was associated with an increased risk of future hypertension in a large U.S. study. This demonstrates possible new roles for factor 9 that might aid in reducing the burden of hypertension in the future.
In a session about COVID-19 and other viruses, UVM professor Dr. Mary Cushman presented a groundbreaking study. During the pandemic, we saw that in people hospitalized with COVID-19, those with more inflammation had higher mortality. In a study from 12 long-term cohorts, Dr. Cushman found that inflammation levels measured 20 years before the pandemic also predicted the chance that a person would develop severe COVID-19 requiring hospitalization. Findings provide brand new insights into susceptibility to severe illness from viruses.
Our last study of the week is my own study. Type A personality has been linked to hypertension, which is the leading risk factor for stroke. My research assessed aspects of type A personality and the risk of stroke in American adults. Associations were more prominent in Black men. For example, those who had more impatience had nearly 2 times the risk of stroke. Those with greater drive to work hard and succeed had a slightly increased risk of stroke. We have known for decades that Black individuals have the highest stroke rates of the United States. So more research is needed to understand what causes the reasons for the race and sex differences we saw. Thank you for watching the video. On behalf of our other UVM reporters, Elizabeth Pendlebury, Vin Lay, Dr. Manaz Mawani, and our mentor, Dr. Mary Cushman, we hope you have enjoyed our reports. This is Jake Aisi, signing off.